To explain how the left always covers up stories that don't fit the liberal narrative is author of the new book, Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America, and friend of the show, and friend of mine, I may say, Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Senator, you know, it's striking how this mayor, new mayor, Freddie O'Connell, a Democrat, is more worried about a leak of a couple pictures of this manifesto than the apparent fact that this trans shooter was going after white children, white Christian children.
Yeah, assuming these images are accurate and nobody from Nashville is denying their authenticity, then this manifesto demonstrates that this deranged shooter was a radical leftist who was lashing out at quote, white privilege and the toxic rhetoric from the left. The toxic rhetoric of critical race theory is what drives this nonsense of white privilege. And anytime there is a crime that contradicts the narrative of the left, it quickly disappears from the headlines. Had this been instead a murderer whose politics were right of center, the media would have a field day exposing it. And I think we ought to condemn murder no matter where the politics are coming from. But, you know, I'll say more broadly, you mentioned my brand new book, Unwoke, which came out today. So today is its release date. It's available in bookstores all across America. It's already a #1 bestseller in politics on Amazon online. And what the book does is it takes you inside how the radical left has seized the major institutions of our nation. I and you and many of us are so frustrated and infuriated. How did things get so crazy in America? Well, this book, Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America, it seeks to answer that question. And Eric, it starts where all of this started, in the universities. And chapter 1 is the universities, which I call the Wuhan lab of the woke virus. It's where the woke virus was created. It's where it mutated, and it's where it spread. And so chapter 1 is the universities, and then the book goes to K through 12 education, which has been poisoned with critical race theory and radical transgender agendas. Then it goes to journalism and explains how woke left-wing journalism now is advocacy and propaganda rather than reporting actual facts. From there, it goes to big business, and then to big tech. And then it goes to entertainment, to Hollywood, to movies, to TV and sports and music, and then finally to science. And every one of them, what the book does is, #1, explain how and why cultural Marxists have seized these institutions. And then #2, even more important, it lays out a practical battle plan for how to take the institutions back, how to defeat this looniness.
Let's do this. How do you? I mean, you're right. They've weaponized the FBI. They've weaponized media now. They've always had the academia has always been wildly liberal. They've weaponized that to propagandize our kids for 4 years. But how do you break it, Senator? It's becoming it's emanating from every corner of the earth.
So, look, you do a host of things. #1, you need sunshine and transparency because the ideas of the radical left are wildly unpopular. No rational person supports abolishing the police. No rational person supports open borders and the chaos at our southern border. No rational person supports medically castrating and sterilizing 8-year-old children. No rational person has difficulty figuring out what a woman is. All of those views, the radical left are on the wrong side of 90-10 issues. And so they rely on force and power to jam through their agenda. So, for example, in the chapter on big business, I discuss how big corporations have become the economic enforcer of the left-wing agenda. But then, in terms of the solution, I focus very much on what happened to Bud Light and to Target. You look at Bud Light, where we've never seen a brand light itself on fire the way Bud Light did, and it went from being the #1 most popular beer in America to dropping out of the top 10, to losing tens of billions of dollars of market value because they looked down on their customers and they tried to jam their political agenda down their throat. And then immediately after Bud Light, we had Target, where Target did the same thing. Instead of selling quality goods at an affordable price, which is why people go to Target, they decided the LGBT agenda was more important, and they began setting up these huge displays pushing transgenderism on children and selling quote, tuck-friendly bathing suits for 3-year-old boys. And here's the interesting point, Eric. So Target lost tens of billions of dollars likewise. And then you look at the conversations among Target executives, what they were saying is, we don't want to be another Bud Light. Don't let us be another Bud Light. The way we defeat it is we change the cost-benefit analysis so the risk, the downside of going woke exceeds the benefit. And I think that's a real victory and a plan that we can emulate and repeat.
Agree, and it's easy to do with business because you just stop buying Bud Light, but can you stop sending your kids to schools? It's not just a few schools. It's so rampant. Senator, can you just help us out here? We're trying to figure out how the Hamas, how the Palestine versus Israel conflict became almost like white privilege Israel against a minority or people of color Palestinians. How did that happen? Who made that happen?
So you're exactly right, and that's what the book Unwoke is all about. This is a manifestation, what we're seeing. So what I explain in the book is Marxism, laid out by Karl Marx. It views the world as inevitable conflict between oppressors and victims. And Marx used socioeconomic differentiators. So the oppressors are the owners of capital and the victims are the proletariat, the workers. And his solution is a violent revolution of the proletariat where they use government force to redistribute wealth from the owners of capital to the victims. Now, at the universities, they expanded, they used that lens, and they focused then on other attributes. So critical race theory is the same dynamic of oppressor and victim, except it puts it in a racial context instead of socioeconomic. To the cultural Marxist, Jews are coded as oppressors, and Palestinians are coded as victims. And so therefore the cultural Marxist supports the violent revolution of the victims, the Palestinians, against the oppressors and using force. And that's why you have leftists celebrating the atrocities of Hamas. And to tie it all together, you look at something like Black Lives Matter, which is a Marxist organization founded by avowed Marxists who are celebrating Hamas, who are tweeting out pictures of the paragliders who were murdering innocent citizens. I did a podcast. As you know, I do a podcast every week, Verdict with Ted Cruz. We do it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago that was entitled Black Lives Matter is Hamas. And I describe how Black Lives Matter, the organization, is viciously anti-Semitic, for decades has called for the abolition of Israel. And then I laid out the corporations that have written checks to Black Lives Matter, like Apple and Amazon and Coca-Cola, and I called them out. Now, what's fascinating, that podcast came out on October 18th. The next day, Coca-Cola went online and erased from their website all the references to the $500,000 they gave to Black Lives Matter.
Maybe they're listening,
That's
Senator.
how
Possibly they're listening. And I'll tell you what, they should listen to the podcast and they should pick up the book, because you're right. You're on it. We need people like you to step up and expose it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Eric.